Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar, The Role of LGBTQ+ Organizations in Youth Food Access. Our moderator today is our own Federal Policy Director, Elana Redfield. Elana?
Thank you, Kim. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you today. We have an amazing panel of experts to talk about an issue that has been very central to the researchers at the Williams Institute for a long time, and an issue I think is probably very central to the work of a lot of the people and organizations that are on this call. So really, we're going to talk about the role of LGBTQ organizations serving youth in addressing food insufficiency or access to food. Because we have such an incredible panel, I'm going to stop my introduction quite short, and I'm going to do just a little overview of who our panelists are, and then I'm going to invite them to jump right into the conversation. So the Williams Institute recently completed a really exciting project supported by No Kid Hungry and in partnership with Bagley Incorporated in Boston. So we have many of the members of that study here to talk, and we also have some other really exciting guests. Kerith Conron is the former Blatchford Cooper Distinguished Scholar and Research Director at the Williams Institute, UCLA. She's a social and psychiatric epidemiologist whose work focuses on documenting and reducing inequities that impact sexual and gender minority populations. Moses Viveros is a community food systems practitioner and currently the program executive for food access at the YMCA of Greater Seattle. They are originally from Chicago, where they have extensive experience working with a variety of startups, movements, organizations, and nonprofits that are centered around principles of food sovereignty. In Moses' view, a large part of building a more just and equitable food system includes addressing and dismantling systemic conditions that limit one's ability to access culture-affirming and nutritious foods and create spaces that recognize and center the presence and voices of marginalized individuals and communities. So Kerith and Moses and I formed the team that did the work on some of our more recent studies, along with many other people from the Williams Institute. I also want to welcome some colleagues from Bagley Inc. Aaron González is the director of Bagley's Boston programs, where he's responsible for developing the leadership capital of Greater Boston's LGBTQ youth to make positive change in their communities. He oversees the implementation of Bagley's statewide network, Bagley's Community Center, which houses youth-led community building, social support, advocacy programming, host homes, behavioral health services, and a comprehensive HIV and STI clinic. Also a member of the Mi'kmaq Nation, Aaron also sits on the Massachusetts Commission on Indian Affairs, representing the North American Indian Center of Boston. Liz Flynn, Bagley's Stabilization and Success Manager, has worked with LGBTQ kids, teens, and their families for over 8 years in clinical and programmatic settings. Liz's background in clinical mental health has focused primarily in working with folks experiencing severe mental illness, anxiety, and phobias. Liz has focused their practice on creating affirming spaces for LGBTQ people to access mental health care and increase access to resources for success. We're also joined today in very exciting news by a representative from the United States Department of Agriculture, who are in many roads around food lead back to the USDA, right? So Alberto González Jr. currently serves as Chief Policy Advisor at the USDA Food and Nutrition Service. Alberto's role at FNS involves providing strategic leadership behind agency-wide efforts to advance the Biden-Harris administration's priorities in the areas of food and nutrition. Prior to his time with the USDA, Alberto served as Senior Project Manager for Health Policy at Unidos US and Senior State Advocacy Manager at Community Catalyst in Boston. And we are really grateful for the ability to work throughout our project with Centerlink. So we have a lovely representative from Centerlink here today, Krista Gertie. Gertie is a youth services leader with over 25 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, currently serving as the Director of YouthLink at Centerlink. Krista's expertise includes designing and administrating crisis intervention programs, shelter and transitional living programs, drop-in centers, and medical and mental health services. So this is this is our group for today. Now, I want to kick us off by asking Krista, to provide a little bit of an introduction from Centerlink. So can you talk a bit about Centerlink and why food insufficiency is an important issue for organizations that are part of that network or organizations serving LGBTQ youth?
Very good. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So Centerlink is a community of 375 LGBT centers nationwide. 81% of our centers have tailored programming for LGBT youth through the age of 24, serving 30,000 young people every week. So through our work at Centerlink, we've long known that LGBT youth experience food insecurity at higher rates than their non-LGBT peers, and that community-based organizations hold a key role in addressing the need. Just want to remind folks that community centers serving queer youth are not only providing safety net programs that include food access, but often they're assisting youth in securing employment, housing, and other basic needs. So I'm really grateful to be here today as we further highlight the issue, ways to address the issue, especially in partnership. We will learn about current research findings on LGBTQ plus food access, highlight strategies that centers can use to address the need, and learn more about the current government programs that could help bolster access and partnership. At Centerlink, we believe that food access, especially for LGBTQ youth, is everyone's work. Stabilizing food security is the starting point for supporting youth who have too often been rejected by their families and communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So then let me turn it over to, I'm going to ask Kerith, in a couple minutes, can you just describe briefly what we know about food insufficiency among LGBTQ youth?
Sure. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to share a few slides. About 1 in 5 LGBTQ high school students experiences hunger because there's not enough food at home. And they may have less access to school-based meal programs than their non-LGBTQ peers because school isn't always a safe place. Older youth, ages 18 to 24, also experience food insufficiency. If you work with youth directly, this is something that you already know. We studied it in a probability-based sample and wrote up some fact sheets that are available on the Williams Institute website. So they're there for you as resources to use in your grant writing moving forward. We wanted to know, since we knew there was a problem, what LGBTQ youth orgs were doing to address food insecurity, particularly what they were doing that they found to be successful and where they were experiencing challenges. Because as Krista said, we know that youth organizations are an important gateway to resources for youth, particularly those who are estranged from family. So what we did is to create a confidential online survey. Bagley was our partner in this work. We had support from No Kid Hungry. We consulted with Feeding America. We were so fortunate to get input from so many wise people. A 20-minute survey, which we researchers think is brief. We were able to ask closed and open-ended questions. We did this work in the summer of 2023, and we heard from 73 youth organizations across the country. Many of them were recruited through Centerlink and some also through a targeted internet search. We offered raffle prizes to express our appreciation for participation in the survey. And if you're one of those organizations who participated in the survey here on the panel today, thank you. So we asked folks how they were providing food to youth and how often they were able to do this. We found that almost all of them were providing food to youth, primarily in the form of food to take home, staples or prepackaged foods or snacks. Some organizations were able to provide hot meals at their organization. But in terms of frequency, we found that only 42% of the programs that were offering food were able to do so on a daily basis, which means that there's more capacity here that's untapped. So we asked people what their most successful strategies were. And so we asked people sort of like what they tried. And as you would imagine, meals and snacks, offering a food pantry, gift cards. These were the most common things that programs that they had tried. And they also happened to be the most successful. Few programs had tried giving direct cash aid to youth, but among those who did, half of them found it to be effective. And many programs were providing information about local resources, food pantries, and meal programs, but fewer found that to be helpful. And then again, many people were trying to enroll youth in government benefits programs, and more people found that to be less helpful. So when we asked people some writing questions about what they found to be helpful and why, here's what they said. They said, provide food to everybody. And a lot of programs talked about stigma and reducing stigma. They said things like this: dinner served to all youth, regardless of need, lowering stigma of those participating in meals. They said engage youth. We hire youth with lived experience to advertise and manage the program. We allow our youth to get involved, restocking our pantry and organizing products. This helps with removing a lot of the stigma. They suggested providing meals and snacks in the context of other activities, describing a monthly meal night that is paired with an event like open mic and karaoke, so that people are coming not just to get free food, they're coming to be in community. And again, this was about reducing the stigma that people may have around getting free food. Programs said, bring youth in, build community, and create program linkages. So in some instances, the food programs were the way to get youth to access more active resources and programs at the centers. And other times, the youth were there to access other types of resources and ended up using the food bank. But the important thing there was creating relationships and community and fostering a climate of kindness. That was really central across what a lot of the programs shared with us. And so one quote from a participant: a lot of our food insecure clients, they're already coming to us for support to socialize, so the barriers are low. We've had people say it feels like getting food from a relative when you're having a hard time. So here are some things that programs had tried that they found to be less successful. Food pantry referrals. The main reason youth didn't use these referrals were that food banks were religiously based organizations. The hours were too early. The youth didn't have documentation meet requirements, and a lack of transportation. That person nailed all the barriers in their one quote. In terms of public benefits, as many of you know who work with youth directly and try to enroll people in public benefits programs, there's many barriers to enroll. And then when you do, the money provided, particularly through SNAP, is quite low. And for some, it may not be worth the effort to the reward. Some people said the majority of our students are under their parents' taxes, or some even have benefits through their families and they aren't eligible to qualify for their own benefits. And another program said, well, maybe it did something, but we didn't have a lot of capacity and we couldn't even sort of follow up to see sort of what happened after we tried to support youth in enrollment and benefits. So across the many questions that we asked, which are written up in our report on the Williams Institute website, which you can use in writing grant reports and other things to explain the need for programs like yours, programs found that on-site meals, snacks, and food pantries were effective ways to provide food to youth and to connect youth to services. They recommended increasing access to consistent and flexible funding would allow them to feed more youth more often. They identified housing as the #1 barrier to food sufficiency for youth. And they recommended increasing access to housing, transitional housing, housing vouchers, and affordable housing as changes that would allow youth to put more of their resources away from shelter and towards food. And at this moment, I'm going to turn the mic over.
Not yet.
No?
Thank you so
Okay.
much, Kerith. We have actually another section before we get to that one.
Okay.
Because just since you were talking about the experiences of LGBTQ organizations, I wanted to call in our colleagues from Bagley now to speak, if you will, to an overview of the ways that Bagley has thought about and addressed food insufficiency needs amongst LGBTQ youth.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so we were part of this conversation, and I think one of the main things is we have young people who attend our center every day, and so we could be part of this conversation with our colleagues and then bring that information back to young people in the center and start to have a more developed conversation with them about not only the things that we were doing, but things that they may feel may be more helpful. So we try to have snacks in the space available to everybody who comes in. And it's not just potato chips on the counter. We have microwavable items in the cupboards and in the freezers for folks to be able to access as they want or need. I think us having such a low barrier for accessing food and having it be very normalized that a lot of our young people participate in the conversations around what kind of food we have in the center really sort of role models what it is that we want, which is everybody is involved in the conversations around what kind of food we could have or potentially access for folks. I think as folks who are doing the purchasing of food, having it also not be, we call them luxury items. If we think that young people would, if we haven't had things like cupcakes in the center in a long time, then we try and purchase things like cupcakes. If we know that young people are talking about how they have a love of Yoo-hoo, then we try and make sure that we have a luxury item of Yoo-hoo in the space. We don't want it to just be about what it is that they need to survive. We also know that they don't have the money to purchase some of the items that they may really just enjoy for whatever reason. And so we also try to purchase those things. Liz can talk a little bit more about this. We also know that young people don't all want to speak in a group. And so we have a variety of ways in which they can contribute to the conversation of food. We have a QR code that's posted where they can make suggestions of food that can be purchased the next time we go shopping. It also contains dietary restrictions that they may have. We want to make sure that the only thing available for folks who are potentially gluten-free isn't just popcorn. We want to make sure that there are other sustainable items that they can eat in the center and potentially take with them. Liz, do you want to add a little bit of anything?
Yeah, sure. I think Erin makes a good point. A lot of our conversations in Bagley are very food centric because we know that so many of our young people come in just on their lunch break to grab stuff, that we provide all those options for youth. But the food that Erin was mentioning is just the food that we have in the center to grab and go. But then we also find that for our daily programming, we also typically have a food component. So if you're joining a particular group that day, there's probably going to be pizza or there's going to be something else. And we want to normalize that conversation so that there isn't a barrier to feeling uncomfortable for asking for food or making a suggestion. Like Erin said, we try to have it as many varieties as possible, whether that's you're someone who feels comfortable chatting in a group, or we have a whiteboard on our fridges for people to gently put their notes of what they might like, or we have QR codes, and our ops coordinator who does the shopping for the center always involves youth, which, as Kerith mentioned in her slides before, that having that youth engagement is a bigger component of it. So oftentimes youth are helping put things away or talking to our ops coordinator about what might other places to try, other grocery stores. So it really is a conversation that we spend a lot of our time talking about and figuring out ways that we can alleviate that barrier. In addition to the food we have in the center, the program that I support, Stabilization and Success, we also have a direct aid service. So for any youth that are, struggling to afford their groceries that month, or also like Kerith had mentioned, sometimes waiting for your SNAP and EBT benefits to come through, you wait months and months, and then you find out they needed another document, and in that whole process, you're not getting the groceries that you need. So oftentimes our youth, I think also because our food conversations are so normalized, feel really comfortable to apply for our direct aid service. So we might be able to support their grocery bills for a whole month, or sometimes 2 months, sometimes longer, depending on the situation. And that direct aid support covers all of Massachusetts, not just the youth that are in Bagley, though we find that a lot of that comes from word of mouth. But yeah, Erin, I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add.
I think just part of normalizing the conversation is if someone applies for a grocery gift card, we have conversations with them about what supermarket is closest to them or that they feel they can get the most for their money, and then cater the gift card to their needs. A lot of times we'll get a standard supermarket. For us here, it's, either Stop and Shop or Shaw's, but a young person may not be near one of those supermarkets. They may be closer to a Trader Joe's. And so Trader Joe's also has different options. And so would that be a better gift card for them? And so having them be part of the conversation of not just being like, well, we'll give you this resource, but it's specifically for this one place that we have access to. Instead saying, where do you have access to? Are you going to be able to transport your groceries? And for some of our young people, they don't have places to house those groceries that we provide for them. And so it's the ability to be able to make multiple trips to this one supermarket in order to get smaller items that they can carry with them. So really having a much more detailed conversation with them and catering it to their needs.
Thank you so much. And that actually, makes me want to ask, Bagley definitely has a much broader perspective on the interconnection of different kinds of supports that might be needed. And one of the things that Kerith highlighted was that housing is deeply connected with food insufficiency. And Aaron, you just spoke to this a little bit. What ways do you see that other services or supports that Bagley provides or that your community provides address food insecurity or food insufficiency through other means, like such as housing? Do you have other examples of programs or services like that?
Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, I think Bagley, we tried kind of similar to what Aaron was just saying. We really try to individualize this for every young person that comes in. So it's kind of hard to give. It's more of like a broad answer because it really is so specific to the particular youth. But the direct aid program that I was talking about really does address kind of it helps bridge a gap for someone, right? So oftentimes someone applies for direct aid because they need help getting into an apartment or maintaining their apartment, which, overall supports their food access. So we often come in with a full month's rent. In a lot of cases, we're able to provide a full month's rent for a young person. In some cases, we have a conversation because everything is so individualized of, it looks like you're applying for direct aid. Sometimes people apply more than once. So we like to have a conversation with them about like, okay, it looks like this is kind of the expense for you. If we were able to offset it this way, what would that open up for you, right? So like if we're able to do your rent for you this month, what other things would you now be able to do because you don't have to worry about $1,200 just going to rent or something like that. So we really try in this whole process to problem solve, right? So while we're waiting for the SNAP and EBT applications to go through, we're also trying to figure out what can we do immediately because you can't wait a month to eat. And the food that we have at the center is great. And a lot of it is very protein rich as well, which of course we know is sustainable. But we also want someone to feel like they have the autonomy to make food when they want to make food and not just necessarily come into Bagley to have that. So a lot of these conversations really are that. They're conversations to problem solve, to figure out how can we empower you to kind of get the things that you need with the services that we have, and how can we tailor the services that we have so that it feels like this is really made for you and something that will benefit you and might change for another youth.
Thank you. Great. So let me transition us then to our next speaker. Moses, can you tell us a little bit about the other report that we did where we looked at employment as a possible way to address food insufficiency amongst LGBTQ youth?
Yeah, happy to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for having me. So yes, in addition to the survey, we also held a convening. So we invited a variety of different organizations and leaders from that work with LGBTQ youth to share their perspectives on whether or not employment could be a viable strategy to address hunger amongst LGBTQ youth. So our firm methods, we organized this panel as a way to explore employment as an avenue to reduce economic barriers to food for LGBTQ plus youth. It was a 3-hour convening that we held on September 12th, 2023. And we focus on the food industry as a common, so low barrier source of employment for workers who have less formal education and work experience with the potential to rise to higher levels of employment. So the event was organized with 3 different panel discussions, so each focused on supporting LGBTQ youth along the work continuum. So getting jobs, succeeding in jobs, and growing and just like further developing and building those work skills. So panel 1 included community-based LGBTQ plus youth programs and LGBTQ plus employment programs. The second panel included organizations with experience providing employment services or training. So really helping youth to build up those work readiness skills and just like anything else they need to be successful in the workplace. And then panel 3 included organizations that focus on food policy and innovation. So that were invited to promote thinking about how existing or promising models might be sustained, replicated, and grown to really help youth to achieve a better level of food security. So for our findings, when this has been something that's been talked about a lot on this panel already, but stabilization, so being able to meet those basic needs, including housing, is really fundamental towards a youth's ability to succeed in the workplace. So, you know, hunger doesn't exist within a vacuum. It's accompanied with all these other factors and conditions. So often when youth are experiencing food insecurity, they could also be experiencing housing insecurity, trouble finding transportation, trouble accessing work appropriate clothing and updated identity documents. So things that will really help youth to be successful in the workplace and to just like really be able to get them in the door. So these must be addressed as a precursor to employment. The second one, and this is something that came up a couple different times during our panel, but folks acknowledge that SNAP and other federal aid programs, while they are helpful if you are eligible for them and if you can, you know, if you could stay on them, there are a lot of opportunities for these programs to be expanded or just made more accessible. So, you know, we've heard time and time again that programs like SNAP or WIC or any other federal aid program can be very difficult to apply for. So often there's a lot of barriers, and that's where things like updated identity documents can be a barrier for LGBTQ plus youth. In addition to this, if someone is eligible for it and receives the benefits, oftentimes the benefit amount is not really reflective of the actual needs for LGBTQ plus youth. So if somebody is homeless or doesn't have access to a kitchen, you can't get, you usually can't purchase hot foods or other prepared items with SNAP. So that's a barrier within itself. Or other times too, the benefit amount may not be enough to cover someone's food needs for that month. So expanded benefits and just more accessible ways to, or just ways to make these programs more accessible will really help out with that. The next finding is mentorship. So youth, especially when they're estranged from family, benefit from one-on-one mentorship to develop problem solving, employment, and other life skills. And these skills are critical to help finding and keeping a job or pursuing a career and contribute to long-term economic stability. The next findings include bridges to inclusive employment. So LGBTQ plus organizations provide essential services to assist LGBTQ plus youth with finding a job at a place where they can succeed. And then in addition to this, employers could take steps to provide inclusive spaces for LGBTQ plus youth to work. So this includes like taking trainings and just like taking on other initiatives to really create that inclusive workspace. Another finding was that there are barriers for community-based organizations. So a lot of the organizations that were on this panel talked about just like issues with capacity, resources, and funding constraints really limit the ability or the program's capability to support LGBTQ plus youth. So coordinated partnerships or multi-agency approaches, including government partners, can really help to just like build on this work and expand it. So to make sure that we're really meeting the needs of LGBTQ plus youth. And then our last finding from this panel was that promoting the agency of LGBTQ youth is really important. So this includes creating up, so LGBTQ plus youth should be engaged at all levels of program or an organization, including economic stabilization activities. So this also includes creating opportunities for youth to be involved in the design and execution of resources and programming offered by the organizations. This can look like one-on-one conversations, surveys, and creating leadership opportunities as ways to capture feedback and to just like really make sure that youth are like being able to contribute towards the resources and programs that are offered. So for recommendations, so based off the findings and insights shared by the panelists, we made a list of recommendations for LGBTQ plus youth to serving organizations and funders to consider as a means of supporting youth and their needs. So first, like I mentioned before, housing and other needs. You know, hunger doesn't happen on its own. We really need to make sure that we're being able to meet all the basic needs of youth. So housing, jobs, food, et cetera, et cetera. So all those are really important towards ensuring that youth will be able to just have a better livelihood and also just be able to be more successful in the workplace. The second one, community mentorship. So like I mentioned before, youth may be estranged from blood relatives, chosen families, and other critical support networks. And these support networks are so critical towards the overall development of youth, for them to just obtain knowledge and other life skills and access to resources that they really need to thrive. So programs must be aware of this and create spaces and opportunities for youth to build support systems with program participants, staff, and other community members. So this can be accomplished through programming that supports community building, like community meal programs, or through hiring of staff and recruitment of volunteers that have shared identities with LGBTQ youth and or similar lived experiences. So safety net supplements, so we've acknowledged that federal aid programs and other aid programs may not fully meet the needs of LGBTQ plus youth. So it's important to offer other safety net supplements. So Bagley was talking about this, where they offer other incentives and other means of support. So those grocery gift cards can really help to just like supplement someone who is receiving SNAP and isn't receiving enough benefits or is just not eligible for SNAP altogether. So just being really mindful of how those safety nets might fall short and what we could do to supplement them. Then our next steps of recommendation, so job readiness and support. So because LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to be estranged from critical support networks, they might not have had opportunities to develop skill sets that can help them enter and be successful in the workplace. So stable employment drastically reduces the likelihood that someone's going to experience food insecurity. So helping youth become work ready is a long-term investment. So programs should be funded to include support through initial work experiences, navigating the challenges, disappointments, and setbacks, which may be part of the process of entering the workforce. So, and like I mentioned earlier, if youth are experiencing oppressive conditions and unwelcoming conditions in the workplace, it'll be challenging for them to maintain stable employment. So therefore, it's really important that we create partnerships and identify workplaces that are, inclusive towards LGBTQ plus youth and will really support their growth and development. And for employers, it's really important that they take on opportunities to create those spaces within their own workforce. So there is a variety of different trainings, different resources that workplaces can implement to help just like create those more inclusive and welcoming conditions. So funder support. So funders also play a critical part in improving outcomes for LGBTQ plus youth. So some of the feedback we received from the panelists included funders who wish to address LGBTQ plus youth employment and food insecurity should consider making multiple year unrestricted and general operating grants available to the organization serving the youth. So funders should also create funding opportunities that are flexible and encourage innovation among grant recipients to change programs and goals in response to the need of youth as they come up. So this can include creating unrestricted funding opportunities and providing support, access to resources beyond funds to help get programs off the ground and to really help them succeed in their goals. And then finally, the last recommendation we have is to expand on our sixth finding that I mentioned earlier, so promoting the agency of LGBTQ plus youth. Organizations working with youth should support, promote, and cultivate LGBTQ plus youth leadership development opportunities. So this includes peer support, youth-based decision-making, and financial support to enable their participation and ensure that programs and resources offered align with the needs and expectations of the youth that we're serving. So again, really empowering youth to really share that feedback and to just like create opportunities within your organization for youth to just like be a part of the decision-making process and be able to tell you, this is what we need. Because, your youth hold a lot of lived experiences, they hold a lot of great knowledge. So they, can definitely help to make sure that we're all going in the direction that we need to go.
Thank you, Moses. Then I'm gonna then take us now to the USDA. I should note, as we've heard earlier in this presentation, SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is a big component of addressing food insufficiency and insecurity. And also there are a whole suite of amazing services that are provided by the federal government or that are available for states to administer. And additionally, under the Biden-Harris administration, we've had a really strong commitment to LGBTQ plus inclusion, which extends to the USDA. So I'm really excited to have our partners here from the USDA. And I'm going to turn it over to Alberto to talk a little bit more about the FNS programs and services.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. And I just want to thank you all for being part of today's conversation. You all are trusted messengers, so it's so critical that we're here talking about these issues that impact our communities on a daily basis, and also use this opportunity to highlight a number of programs and initiatives that we're working on to address these barriers. As was mentioned, my name is Alberto González. I'm Chief Policy Advisor at the USDA's Food and Nutrition Service. So I'll go ahead and talk a bit more about our programs and a few other items related to today's conversation. So we can move on to our next slide. So at the USDA, at FNS specifically, we administer a suite of more than 16 federal nutrition assistance programs that reach 1 in 4 Americans over the course of a year. And that includes many LGBT community members as well. I won't be able to go through all of the programs, but I'll just quickly note that we have about more than 16 federal nutrition assistance programs. And I did want to recognize that we also have regional offices. We have 7 regional offices across the country. You can find that information on our website. That's fns.usda.gov. It's our regional offices that work closely with our state agencies. And those are key partners that help or work on implementing our nutrition programs. So it's state agencies, like your state SNAP agency, and local agencies as well. And that is, and I'll follow up with that later on during my presentation, but wanted to provide you with that infrastructure that's in place. I also wanted to recognize that at the USDA, we do have an employee resource group for LGBT folks. It's called Equality USDA. So wanted to let folks in the audience know that we do have an organization at the USDA that is focused on elevating and celebrating LGBT representation at the USDA. And then we also have mission areas. We have a rural development mission area that covers issues related to rural health, to rural housing. We also have the Farm Service Agency, and within our Natural Resource and Conservation Service mission area, we have the Office of Urban Planning and Innovative Projection, which does some work with youth and universities across the country. So I just wanted to acknowledge that connection. So next slide. I wanted to just briefly highlight, as was referenced earlier, some of the actions that this administration has taken to support LGBT communities. One of the earliest, if not the earliest, one of the earliest executive actions that the administration took was around the executive order on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation. So it's that executive order that worked to inform the work of USDA to promote USDA's program access and in combating discrimination against the community. It's also informed and helped advance the work we're doing around equity and access in FNS food and nutrition programs. So I just listed a couple of other relevant executive orders that have really driven this administration and the USDA to take action to ensure that we are able to promote equitable access to community members across the country on our suite of nutrition programs. And as I think at some point we'll drop a link in the chat to the non-discrimination webpage that we have, our statement and the work we're doing to ensure that our program participants are aware of their rights and where to go in case they feel like their rights are violated. And that includes individuals, LGBT community members as well. So next slide. So I just wanted to provide at a high level the whole of government approach that we're taking on to advance the White House National Strategy on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. So about 2 years ago, the White House convened a conference, a historic conference on hunger, nutrition, and health. And with that, a corresponding national strategy to advance the goals of the White House Conference, which are to end hunger, improve physical activity and nutrition, and to reduce diet-related diseases by 2030. And over 20 federal agencies contributed to this national strategy, which you could find on our website. And the #1 priority for the USDA was promoting healthy school meals for all. And I'll talk more about that shortly, but wanted to just include here a list of the pillars that are helping to inform the implementation of this national strategy. So you'll see here, we're working to improve food access and affordability, and that includes increasing SNAP benefits. We talked about SNAP earlier in this presentation, and I just wanted to mention that one of the earliest actions we took under the Biden-Harris administration was to update the Thrifty Food Plan, which serves as the basis to calculate SNAP benefits. that had not been updated in 45 years. And so in 2021, we worked to update the Thrifty Food Plan. And as a result, SNAP benefits increased by 21%. And this process of reevaluating the Thrifty Food Plan under the Farm Bill of 2018, we have to do that every 5 years to align with the latest reality of what people are buying at grocery stores, right? And I included a few other lists here around SNAP online shopping, which is now available in all 50 states, and our work to advance WIC online shopping as well. You'll see here a number of other pillars that we're looking to advance on nutrition and health, physical activity, and our work, again, to promote healthy school meals for all kids. So we could go ahead and move on to the next slide. So one other initiative I wanted to highlight is our efforts around food and nutrition security. So when we say nutrition security, we mean consistent access to healthy, safe, and affordable foods that are essential for optimal health and well-being. This builds on our long-standing work to address food insecurity across the country. And so with this approach, it really takes on a health equity lens. We're recognizing that folks it's a challenge for folks to access healthy foods. And so in our work to advance nutrition security, we are operating, or we're using these 4 pillars, which I've outlined here around meaningful support to help support individuals in accessing healthy foods over the course of their life. Collaborative action. We know that in order to achieve these goals, we need to work with key partners, trusted partners. Healthy food, supporting fruit and vegetable consumption via our programs. And then we have equitable systems. So making sure that we center equity in everything that we do. And within that, it's ensuring that we reach underserved populations, bringing language access, addressing language access issues as well, and bringing together diverse partners to foster healthy food options within our programs as well. Next slide, please. So again, I won't be able to go through all the programs. You could visit our website, again, fns.usda.gov for background. But I wanted to highlight a few exciting programs for this audience, namely our child nutrition program. So we know summer is wrapped up, but this was a historic summer for us. We actually launched Sunbucks or Summer EBT, which became a nationwide permanent program and was implemented for the first time nationwide this summer. So really a historic achievement to try to close the summer hunger gap for kids across the country. We estimate that about 21 million kids this summer were able to access Sunbucks or Summer EBT, which is where they would get $120 in in a card to be able to purchase food in whichever stores take SNAP benefits. And that's in addition to Sun Meals to Go, which is another new permanent feeding program in certain rural areas across the country to help families with kids, with eligible kids to access food, whether grab and go or have them be delivered in their homes. So this is an important program for rural families. And then Sun Meals, which is our longstanding summer nutrition program, our in-person summer nutrition program we've had. In addition to those programs, school meals, we have our National School Lunch Program that reaches 30 million kids every day. And that includes the school breakfast program. I participated in these programs, so we know that this is a powerful program. And we've been doing work to update the nutrition standards to meet the latest dietary guidance so that kids are getting access to tasty, healthy foods. And it's another critical action that we've taken to build on the National Strategy on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health. And then we also have CACFP, which is a child and adult care food program. This is the program that supports meal access to young kids in child care centers, for example, and then for older adults. So they're able to access food in these settings as well. Next slide, please. And going back to SNAP, which is the nation's largest nutrition assistance program that's been around for 60 years. So SNAP provides allotments to those who are eligible, and we know that there's about 41 million people that participate in SNAP. And so we know that we recognize that some of the issues that were raised earlier in the presentation, these are certainly issues that we are working on, and we work closely with state agencies. We've been working with local leaders and other partners as well to make sure that we're modernizing the program, right, to meet the latest where we're at today. And so it's that work that's informed, that is informed by what we're hearing from different partners. And again, it involves our work with state agencies, but also we know that there's a whole ecosystem of partners in place that help this program operate. We know that across the country, there's 250,000 SNAP retailers. There are innovative programs happening that are recognizing the health benefits that come with SNAP participants having access to food. There are incentive programs to encourage SNAP participants to be able to access affordable, healthy groceries. We have another program called the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program, GUSNIP, that really ties in the health connection here. I do want to highlight that with SNAP, there is a SNAP outreach plan that each agency works on. And there are key demographics that are prioritized, and college students, young folks, are one of the key priority populations under these SNAP outreach efforts, and that is on the website as well. SNAP Ed, SNAP Nutrition Education, is an evidence-based program helping folks stretch their SNAP dollars, and there's a nutrition education component. There are about more than 30,000 community partners across the country that are part of SNAP Nutrition Education, including a number of institutions of higher learning. So we have that information on our website again. Again, that's another one of our programs that's looking to promote education on SNAP. And there is, a culturally relevant and linguistically appropriate education that's part of that as also. So just wanted to highlight that piece there. I know that there was a prior conversation on employment and training. There is a SNAP employment and training program, SNAP E&T, that provides opportunities for folks to gain real life skills, but also job skills. I had the opportunity to attend a SNAP E&T graduation in Philadelphia last year, and so can see how these programs are a critical tool to help support individuals and being able to gain employment and support their support themselves and then their family members as well. Next slide, please. So mindful of time, but I just wanted to highlight a number of opportunities or examples of what we're doing to engage youth partners. I couldn't list them all, but I wanted to list a number of them that come to mind. So we work closely with organizations like Gen Youth to promote the positive impact of healthy school meals, for example. We have our 4-H and Positive Youth Development partnership, which is within the USDA as a whole, to build the next generation of food and agriculture leaders. We work closely with HSIs, or Hispanic Serving Institutions, particularly when it comes to developing a future workforce that's reflective of particular communities. We have partnerships with 1890 institutions to again spread the word about USDA programs and initiatives. And just a few others. We have My Plate, which is not youth specific, but I just wanted to highlight the work we've done on My Plate to promote education and tools. We have Mi Plato, which is a resource in Spanish. Again, it's another educational tool that we were using to leverage and educate folks on our programs. And we also have a youth liaison at the USDA as well. So wanted to highlight those examples there. So I think we have our next slide. So I know that was a lot, but I just wanted to quickly use this time to highlight, well, one, to thank you all for your incredible work, and please continue to work with the USDA. We want to continue to listen and learn and hear about the experiences and some of the findings that were shared. These are things that we're looking at. Would encourage folks on the call to reach out to and connect with state agencies or community partners on opportunities for collaboration on our programs, including school meals. WIC was another program for women, infants, and children to be able to access nutritious food. I mentioned SNAP. We also have our Farm to School program. Again, a whole variety of programs to help community members out. And just to mention that I know housing was another component of the conversation, and really the one thing I wanted to add here is that there is a U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. USDA Secretary Vilsack will become the chair of that Interagency Council in about a month. So again, this is an opportunity to continue to engage the USDA around issues related to homelessness, housing, rural issues, for example. And so again, for folks who are interested in learning more about our programs or opportunities, please reach out to the USDA, or you can reach out to your respective state agency for more information, as they are critical partners helping us to implement our suite of nutrition programs across the country. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back to our host for today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one transitional question. So Alberto, if someone wants to learn more about, particularly if you're an LGBTQ youth organization and you want to learn more about how constituents might access any of these programs, or how the organization itself might apply for grants or participate in other kinds of programs, where's the best place to go for information? Is that the USDA Youth Liaison? Is that your team? Where's the best place someone should go to learn more?
Yeah, so you could go to our website, fns.usda.gov, and then I will send in a follow-up. We have our External and Governmental Affairs team email address, so you could email us, and we could help connect you with help answer your questions. When it comes to whether it's grants or other programs, or it's states, agencies are critical voices in that conversation. But certainly we could help facilitate connections with them or other partners. So when I have a moment, I will drop the link in the chat. But certainly our external affairs team can be a great resource for folks interested.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to open up we have some great questions. I'm going to start with the first question we received, and this is for the whole panel. If you could make one recommendation for making SNAP easier to access for Two-Spirit LGBTQ plus youth, what would it be? So I'll hand that over to our panelists, particularly our panelists from community organizations and researchers, hear what you might think.
Well, I'll jump in and say that it's unclear to me why we need to ask gender or gender identity in order to access public benefits. So I think that examining requirements for eligibility and asking what is really necessary would be one particular way to make the process easier.
Maybe I could turn to Bagley and ask what recommendations you might have, or barriers that you've seen.
I think that one of the barriers is around age. Not all of the young people who are they don't necessarily have the luxury to be able to wait until they're 18 to need these services. And so if we have younger folks who don't have caregivers, or they are lost to different systems, being able to access any of these programs is much more difficult. And so it is unfortunate to say, but, removing any sort of age restrictions, because there are younger people who need to access these services. And, by extension of that, it then also changes the documentation that they sort of have. So even if a young person is thrown out of their home, their caregivers, whoever they are, they don't throw them out with their social security card and a copy of their birth certificate. They throw them out with whatever is available on their backs. And so, it becomes a larger systematic problem of making it easier for folks to be able to access forms of identification. You can't get a copy of your birth certificate unless you have an ID, and you can't get an ID unless you have your birth certificate. So I think trying to make those systems more accessible for folks really needs to be reviewed, because the situations in which they were, made for, ideally being able to do those things, these situations aren't ideal. And so being able to look at the ways in which we sort of access those services needs to be reevaluated.
I will just add, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to quickly mention, so so there are certain things that the USDA has the authority to do, but a lot of that is driven by what Congress says. And I had to be careful how I say this, but there is an upcoming farm bill, or there could be, or another piece of legislation or vehicle that may impact SNAP, how SNAP works in the future. So we'll just encourage folks to just, monitor that. And because again, there's certain things that we have the authority to do. And I think we agree with the work that needs to be done to make it easier for those who are eligible to sign up. And it's something that we've done particularly in the WIC space as well, to modernize it, because we had historic funding from Congress to do so. And so I think that's another thing I wanted to add, is just tracking other vehicles where there could be an opportunity for you to just educate particular audiences about some of these circumstances.
And I would note that I really appreciated that there was some thought that went into the regulation that came out for summer ABT for the Sun program, because there was some consideration of the fact that many LGBT people or anyone who's runaway or homeless youth in that category might access food in a different way than people who can get it through schools or through their families. So I really appreciate the USDA taking that into consideration in that rulemaking. I want to move us forward and ask one more question here related to steps the USDA has taken. There was this, very unprecedented and amazing commitment to LGBT inclusion that the Biden-Harris administration has made, and we've seen that reflected throughout USDA's programs. Someone in the audience asked what mechanisms are used to support and monitor implementation of those. So I wonder if you could speak very briefly to this question of how people could report violations of those commitments, or how any other kind of updates you could provide on enforcement of the SOGI protections in these programs.
Yeah, so I think my civil rights director colleague would be the appropriate person to answer. But what I could share is that there is compliance that our department does with state agencies and others that are administering our programs. And because this is a requirement, like that's certainly something that we monitor, and if there are any violations or other questions, we within the USDA we have an Office of Civil Rights that covers the entire department, but that information should be found on our website, where we have our non-discrimination statement, and that's something that it must be shared with any entity that's receiving federal dollars that's administering our program. So there are these there are mechanisms in place for compliance, for monitoring, and then there is a point of contact of some sorts to relay these types of questions.
Thank you. I'm going to combine two questions then for our last question, and invite everyone to respond if you have thoughts. So we have two questions about types of things people can access using either using federal safety net programs or from organizations. So one of those questions was, what if young people need to access cooking utensils or microwaves or kettles or pots, things like that? And another is about the types of food that are covered or not covered. And people may end up choosing less healthy food because of budget. So I wanted to put this question to the panel about sources of funding for making sure that young people can meet their cooking needs, and also making sure that people can eat healthier, more nutritious meals. So thoughts from the panel on those two questions?
I'm happy to start. I think we often have this conversation about accessing healthier options of food. and the price, junk food is cheaper and is often on sale. And I think one of the things that we are doing, particularly at Bagley and in Massachusetts, is we have farmers markets that happen on the weekends. A lot of them are seasonal, but a lot of the farmers markets now, you'll notice, will say accepting EBT or accepting SNAP, which is amazing. Most folks didn't get that. They just didn't have the option to be able to do that. And farmers markets, especially there's one specifically down in downtown Boston. It's by Haymarket, but it is this massive food mart, and the food is very it's priced for people to be able to purchase in bulk. Not being able to have food storage is a different thing, but to be able to buy it, the prices are listed, they are affordable. All of the vendors post whether or not they are also accepting SNAP and EBT benefits. So I think really trying to find that as a resource for folks and advertising farmers markets where they are, even if it is just seasonal, it is definitely a momentary release to be able to access much healthier food options.
Thank you. Any other comments on that question?
Yeah, just jumping off of what Aaron said, there has been programming in the past too that Bagley has done of, now that you have all this produce, what do you do with it? And like thinking about how you can make many ingredients based off of, the $10 worth of produce that you got, how you can stretch that, how do you cook that, how do you preserve that? So providing that side of the education too, as well, of like, this is how you shop for it, and now this is kind of how you can make it last and work for you is something else that has definitely been of interest for our youth too.
Thank you. Any other final thoughts on this question of resources to help make food more accessible?
Yeah, definitely. So building on what everyone else has shared already, I think just hosting more community-based like meal programs, so community dinners, lunches, or even places like where you could cook the meals together. Just like it's really great for community building, and it also is a great way for you to get introduced to new cooking methods, access to utensils, and just like learn about how they could do this. In terms of like helping you get access to these utensils or just like resources at home for their own use, that's a bit more challenging because oftentimes, we run into the issue where grant funding is restricted. So it's like you can use it for food or staff time only. Or, people aren't usually thinking about these things when they're thinking of like in-kind donations to organizations. So I would say like being really intentional about with the resources and items that you're asking for from donors is really helpful. So I used to manage a food pantry back when I was in Chicago, and we would be really intentional about the resources, types of food, and just other resources that we'd be asking for. And we would often see that people would be really responsive to that. So if you make the ask, like, hey, like our youth need like this basic set of cooking utensils, like somebody will probably get it for y'all. But yeah, it's just like, again, being really listening to what the youth need and just being really intentional with your ask when you're engaging with donors.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So thank you so much to Moses, to our panel, to everyone who's here. Thank you to Centerlink so much for like bringing us all together and helping make these projects possible. Thank you to the funders that support us, No Kid Hungry, and thank you again to our amazing panel here today. So we're going to call it a wrap. I hope you all have a great day and hope we connect again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.